Hey, welcome back to Bums and the Bleachers. Good to be back after a couple weeks off. I'm one of your hosts, John, aka the Dram Daddy, alongside Mike Praz Master Presnowski. How's it going, Mike?
Doing very well, John. It's been a little bit. Both have some crazy schedules, but we try our best to try and stay a little more on schedule than we were last season. And despite a little bit of a rocky road trip the Cubs were just on, still in first place right now, so they're still a relevant team to talk about at this point. They haven't fully, they're not fully out of it like they were, at this point last year in June. So,
yeah. I mean, what I'll say is that if the Cubs offense and the Cubs rotation are taking a little bit of a break, why can't we, right? Why can't we have days off if they're going to take some days off here? So,
hey, speaking of the Cubs taking a day off, did you happen to see on Instagram some of the players were out on the water today? Guess someone has a boat that they took out, and it's like a big group picture with like Tucker, Turner, Carson Kelly, a couple of the pitchers too.
Yeah, I did see some of that. I saw Porter Hodge was out there with them.
Porter Hodge too.
So hopefully it's a good day off, well deserved. These hot summer days we know are grueling. We're starting to hit these dog days of summer coming up here, and I mean it's already been like 95-100 degrees in Chicago over the last week or so. Brutal weather. We were just talking about it off air. I mean, I'm a big whiskey drinker, and honestly, this is the time of year that man, it is tough to drink whiskey unless it's like in a cocktail because it's too damn hot. I was outside yesterday, just tequila and squirt, man, and some Pacificos. That was it. That's all I did all day yesterday.
That's not a bad combo for the summer. Peter, thank you for chiming in. I mean, we'll get into that later in the show, but a lot to get into with the Cubs. I mean, to bring it back to the drink conversation. Spell's Oberon right now. I'm typically just a beer guy. Maybe we'll mix in a seltzer here and there whenever it gets like crazy hot, like it was in the past few weeks. But
as you can see in the background here, I'm going old school, staying loyal. Yeah, old style, bringing Wrigley to me. Nice. But yeah, no, this weather's been brutal, man. I don't know about you. I'm not a big summer person. I'm probably like the worst Hispanic you'll ever meet. I just don't enjoy the summer. It is not for me. I don't know about you. So I don't mind the winter. I'm not mad at the winter. I'm only offended when it gets to like minus 20, minus 30 degrees. Like when it gets to those days where it's just like brutal and just it's criminal to be that cold. That's when I hate it. I'm fine up to like maybe like 20 degrees to the teens. I'm usually good in the summer. Once it hits like above like 75, I'm out. I don't want anything to do with it.
I'm kind of the opposite. I prefer it to be hot. Although we always get like a solid I'd say week stretch every year in Chicago where it's like upper 90s and maybe a day or two where it touches the hundreds. We already got that in middle of June at this point, and probably going to get some more before this summer's over. So, I mean, hopefully that's a sign of things to come for the Cubs offense as, they struggled a bit at Wrigley earlier this year. But yeah, I mean, as far as the cold goes, I'm kind of on the same scale as you, unless it's impossible to go outside.
Yeah.
I built up a thick enough skin to fully get used to it by now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we talked about it, earlier this year. I mean, over the last 3 years, I lost 60 pounds. So I think part of that is I'm not carrying that winter weight anymore. So it's I definitely notice the cold more. And I definitely notice the heat more. So it's, I'm just this week I'm dying. I'm miserable. I stay indoors AC, but, all right, so let's talk baseball. I know we're talking weather and stuff like that. Let's talk some baseball. But I'm gonna address the elephant in the room, and I already probably know the answer because you're the internal optimist between us two. But are you panicked? The Cubs went 500 in the month of June. You could see clearly that the offense, and we talked about it last show. We knew that the 6 runs a game offense was not sustainable. But what I will say that I noticed from the Cubs offense over the last month is the walk rate has gone down, which made them such a good offense. As they were getting on base, they were drawing walks, they were drawing pitchers into deep innings and really kind of getting them out early in games. And the walk rates kind of come down a little bit. The slug has been sporadic. They've been really rough against left-handers. The starting pitching back down to earth. Colin Ray has looked very pedestrian over his last 5 or 6 starts. In his first 7, he had like a sub-3 ERA. And I think it's probably above 8 now. It's probably north of 7 or 8 right now over the last 5 or 6 starts. Matthew Boyd stayed pretty consistent, but, it was great to see Shōta Imanaga back, which was much needed from that rotation. We're going to talk about later. Ben Brown has been atrocious in some of his recent starts. So are you panicked? Are you starting to press the panic button in June? We've got a month before the trade deadline, and, we've got the Cardinals and Brewers nipping at the heels here. So are you panicked?
I mean, this is going to sound typical for me. No, I am not. And I'll give you valid reasons why too, because I probably would be if Shōta did not return in this past road trip and, looked as good as he did. And I probably would be if they weren't about to face, a Guardians team that, when we get to the preview for that, I think is going to be a very favorable matchup for the Cubs. But I mean, they to go 500 in June, if that is the worst that they do in any month this year, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. We've been through other Cubs teams that have had months that totally tanked their season. See, the last 2 Mays, and then they finally get back into it when later in the season in 2023. But then, kind of fall apart in September, where a good enough May, if they had, a May that was on the level of this June, they probably would have made the playoffs that year. So, I mean, I think that there's definitely reason to panic if you're on the side that would panic. But I also think that there's also reinforcements coming for this team right now, and that, they got Shōta back, and that Ben Brown is not a regular in this rotation anymore. They're in the mix to possibly trade for a starting pitcher in the upcoming weeks. So, I'm not gonna panic really until I see what the results of those reinforcements and potential moves are. How about you? Where are you at on it?
Everyone knows me. I'm the pessimist here, right? But I'm not panicked yet. I'm not there yet, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with a couple things, right? Getting Imanaga back was huge. To me, that's like a trade. You just traded for a starter, right? Because you basically just flopped Ben Brown for Imanaga, and you got a frontline starter out of it, right? And they had been in first place with their starting catcher down, their starting number 1 and number 2 pitchers in the rotation down pretty much all of this year. And they've had, a couple bumps and bruises along the way with some of the rest of their lineup. Ian Happ had a short stint on the IL. Porter Hodge just came back. So I'm not there yet.
About Hodge too. Yes, that's right.
I think that, to your point, if this is the worst month that they have all year, I don't think it's a bad time for it to happen. What I think amplifies it and makes it feel probably worse is that Milwaukee and St. Louis have played so well in the month of June, and they made up a lot of ground, during that month. So I think that's where it probably feels a little bit worse. But I think when you look at the roster on paper and the way that they've played up to this point, I'm not there yet, and I still think that they have plenty of pieces, and I do think that Jed is going to push in a lot of his chips, if not all of them, for this year. Because you've got 1 year, half a year of Tucker left, which, I know you want to touch on a little bit later. I think it's half a year left to Tucker and nothing more than that. But it'll be pretty interesting to see what they do in the trade, with the trade deadline coming up in a month. No teams are really doing anything right now. Again, we talked about it in the last show. This is the beauty of adding another wild card, is that you have so many teams that are in it. and
yeah,
they
exactly. It's gonna
really
be
hold back. Yeah,
so few sellers
right.
in this market. Yeah,
It's a seller's market for sure because of that, right? And I think you've got teams that they're kind of bordering right now. Like, what is Boston going to do? Does Toronto think that they're serious enough, in that division and in the AL? What's going to happen with Arizona? Does Texas make a run or not? You've got all these teams. On paper the teams that are going to sell, right? Like
right.
Colorado, the White Sox, the Pirates,
The Marlins,
the Marlins, and
yeah.
that's in maybe Oakland, right? And that's maybe about it, right? Where we're standing. So a lot of teams clumped up in the middle or towards right around the wild card spot that maybe think that they with a couple moves can make a push. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But no, I'm not there yet. I'm not super panicked yet. I think that like I said, you got Imanaga back. Probably make some trades here. The next month or so. And All-Star break will come at a good time. I think it's going to come at a good time where they're struggling right now. Get, a week or so, a few days to just take a breather, get back up. And the rest of the schedule doesn't look like it's as daunting as it did at the start of the year. So I think that plays in their favor as well.
For sure. Just to provide a little bit of context. So for this month of June, Cubs were far from the only contending team to struggle as bad as they did.
Yeah.
They went 13-13, as did the Yankees, the Phillies, the Giants. Padres went 13-14. Mariners, who started the month in first place, fell out. They went 12-14. The Mets are 12-15. That's a really tight race too between the Mets and the Phillies for the NL East lead right now. So, it's not, you hit the nail on the head. It's not so much that like the Cubs, like you would want them to play better than 500 for the month of June, but the bigger factor has been like how on fire Milwaukee and St. Louis have been this month that have like really been the bigger anxiety inducer than anything else.
Well, they've also played a really soft schedule as well too. I mean, they started playing pretty much the schedule we had last month, where they were playing some of these like sub 500 teams, like the Marlins and the Pirates, and they're beating up on each other. So,
hey, shout out to the Rockies yesterday. Got it done against the Brewers for us. Thank you.
Was that their first road win all year, maybe, or something crazy? I know they hadn't.
No, they earlier this year. I want to say like it took until like maybe mid-May or something like that, but they did sweep a series in Miami. So they had some road wins, but
I knew there was something crazy. Like they hadn't done it. They haven't won something in a while. Like, I don't know if it was like a road game where they had like more than, 5 runs or it's some crazy stat, but yeah, thankful for Colorado yesterday. That gave a little bit of breathing room, tiny bit.
Right.
All right. Well, let's talk about, the month of June, right? Like the heat start, the summer's starting to heat up. The humidity's obviously going to make the ball fly.
Yeah.
You and I were texting over the weekend. Wrigley has really been a pitcher-friendly ballpark over the last couple of years, but the last homestand with the Seattle Mariners and Milwaukee Brewers, ball was flying. It was definitely getting out of the park. I don't know if that's going to remain the same. I think if I had to take a guess and I had to place a bet, I would say the wind blows in more games than it blows out.
Okay.
But those two series, I think, were pretty wild with the amount of scoring that was happening.
They really were. There were like a crazy amount of balls that you would expect to just like go off like the ivy covered wall that like went out on a line and like were still going up. Like the one that PCA hit against the Brewers that like hit off the video board, like, that was like a screaming line drive that like you wouldn't expect to like stay up as long as it did. And then I think the Saturday game against the Mariners, Michael Busch had a pretty similar home run that went off like the LED board underneath the scoreboard there. And then also in that Mariners series, freaking Cal Raleigh continued his run of dominance this year. That guy's having maybe like the greatest season by a catcher ever. Like he's got 30 home runs and, we're not even in July yet.
Yeah, that guy's unbelievable right now. And I think if it weren't for Aaron Judge, that probably would be the AL front runner, to be honest with you.
I mean, you know what? You could honestly make a case that, like, you take Aaron Judge off the Yankees, they're maybe still a playoff team. You take Cal Raleigh off the Mariners, like, what are they? They're probably, down there with the A's for last place right now. So
it's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. So we know that Tuesday, that was the beginning of the homestand where they faced Milwaukee. They lost 5-3 that game.
No, they won.
I'm sorry, they won that game 5-3. I'm sorry, and Ben Brown looked halfway decent in that game. That was before kind of the downfall. Wednesday was the rain out. Makeup will be in August, and then you had the slugfest on Thursday.
By the way, thank Christ that game was rained out, because you know who was supposed to start from Milwaukee that game, right? Yeah.
Well, it didn't really help when you had to face Peralta the next game, and
that's true. That's true.
They were a little stymied until in the later innings, and they clawed back. Just couldn't surmount enough offense to overcome Taillon's crazy ability to give up home runs this year. I mean, how many home runs has Taillon given? It's got to be in the 20s.
That sounds about right. I think as of his last start against the Cardinals, he's up around like 21, 22, which, unfortunate, because like up until that start against Milwaukee, like I think we said it on our last podcast, I gave him some praise for like really kind of holding down like the top of the rotation while Steele and Shōta had been out. But like now it's kind of coming to the point where like, the other shoe kind of dropped with him. Hopefully he can get it
22.
together. 22 home runs. Okay.
22 home runs, and his career high is 27. So he is on pace to blow that out of the water.
Oh, man. Keep that ball on the ground, JMO, especially at Wrigley, please.
Yeah, it's tough with him too, because the one thing that I think we love about Jameson Taillon, and I think the one thing that obviously is going to hurt, it's feast or famine with him when it comes to this, because he's a strike thrower. He's going to throw strikes. He's going to throw everything in the zone. And the hitter guesses right, it's going out. So, it's pretty interesting, because it's also what's really helped him be successful in a lot of games and keep his pitch count down, because he's throwing so many strikes and just getting weak contact. But every so often, and probably more often than not lately, he's been giving up some big power. So, that Thursday game was obviously a rough game to watch. And then you start playing Seattle. They got thumped on that Friday, 9-4 that game.
That's a game, for what it's worth, I think could have gone way differently, because if you remember, that is the game where Matthew Boyd had that comeback line drive that,
clipped his shoulder.
Clipped his shoulder, and he had to leave after that. If he gives you one more inning, and you're leading after that, you feel pretty good about your chances, instead of having to go to, our whipping boy on the show, Ryan Presley, who, it had been pretty effective since being taken out of the closer role, but came into that game where he had to face 2, 3, 4 of the Mariner lineup, which included, I think, both Julio Rodriguez and Cal Raleigh. And, that was kind of disaster. I kind of wonder why they didn't go to Brad Keller in that spot when he hadn't been used all that much in the Brewers series, but it is what it is. Cubs drop a pretty tough one, but at least they keep most of their high leverage relievers fresh for that game.
Yeah, and for the most part, I think, the bullpen had been really good. I mean, if you look at the stats since April, they are either the best bullpen in baseball or top 2 or 3. When it comes to ERA, WHIP, strikeouts, I believe, walk rate. I mean, their bullpen has been really dominant. So, you're going to have those games where, it's going to happen. And again, the wind was blowing out. Ball was flying everywhere. You could see, obviously, the next game on Saturday, the wind was still blowing out. Thankfully, the Cubs were on the right side of that, winning 10-7. But, again, it just, a lot of power, a lot of slug happening over that weekend. And then they wrapped up that series again with the huge loss where they just got blown out. It felt like it was kind of going back and forth early on, and then it just...
You know what else was happening a lot in that series, too, especially in the Saturday game, is a lot of like balls that were not hit all that deep, but like the wind was kind of playing tricks on them. There were a couple drops there were a couple drops that like PCA and Hap had. So, it's on a day where the wind is somewhat neutral or blowing in, that's one where you could expect like a lot less offense, and probably on both sides of the ball, because the Cubs did do their fair share of hitting home runs that day as well.
Yeah, and don't worry, Brett, we're going to talk all about the pitching. Pitching is definitely it's definitely on our agenda for today, to really kind of dive into that, because I mean the next thing we wanted to talk about outside of that was Ben Brown going down, right? Before we do that, there's a good segue, right? We went into the St. Louis series, and Ben Brown really, I mean, just for all intents and purposes, just shit the bed in this outing. And
he did, and I'll say this: you made an excellent observation to me too early in this game when he had a really good first inning.
Yep. I told you, I was like, he's really struggled the first inning of most games. That's been his kind of MO. And he had a really quick first inning where I think he only had 5 pitches in the first inning, and was able to work really quickly through that. And then after that, it just like, man, he just imploded. It was, 2 runs in the 4th, 4 runs in the 5th, 2 runs in the 6th, and that was it. Lights out for Ben Brown that game. And the Cubs offense couldn't muster anything up. And, quite honestly, I think, I was texting you really frustrated over that series. And I'm sure you felt it. Like I was, I just go off the rails when the Cubs lose, but it's specifically when they play the Cardinals. And
that's valid.
This was a game where it's like, Craig Counsell, like we talked about it, he's probably the most even keel dude. I think I called him the Levy Smith of the Chicago Cubs, right? Like you're not really going to get like this animated like excitement or anger out of him. He's not that dude. He's just not who he is.
You're not going to get anything that our buddy Peter is referring to here with Lou Piniella, going out and yelling at umpires or anything like that. Yeah, no.
No. So I mean, you're not going to get that out of him. But that's the game where I would have loved to see some kind of fire, or at least like the shortest leash on Ben Brown that that we could have seen, because like you have to win these division games. These are the games that matter the most, are divisional games, right? And when you play your rival, who had notoriously beat up on you for decades, and they're also chasing you, right? They're right at your heels. This is the game that I would love. Game 1, where Craig Counsell could have set the tone and said, "All right, you know what? 2-run home run. All right, I'll give it to you, Ben." Then he gave up a second 2-run home run. And then after that, I'm like, all right, he's given up 4 runs at this point. He's clearly getting, squared up at this point. Pull him. He left him in there. He gave up another 2-home run, right? I think, what did he end up giving? Did he give up all 8 runs?
It was all 8 runs.
They were 4 2-run home runs, right?
4 2-run home runs. And I went back and looked too. He mainly throws 2 pitches. He does also mix in a changeup as well too. It was on all 3 of the pitches that he does throw that got hit out as well too. So that was brutal outing for Ben Brown. And you did bring it up that like Craig Counsell is pretty even keeled, but Ben Brown is like kind of the one guy who like he has openly criticized a bit. Like there were a few like the really bad outings from Brown that he's never going to like go full Lou Piniella or go full like, stereotypical football coach on any of his players. But he's been openly saying like Ben Brown needs to be better than he has been. And he'd been skating on kind of thin ice. Like I kind of was of the mindset that like the next start that he was going to have like this was going to lead to him getting sent down. So no surprise
and we talked
there.
about it. We talked about it too. I mean, the one thing that I brought up to you, I said, the quick inning, 5 pitches. I was like, man, this Cardinals lineup, they're looking to jump on him. Like he got out in 5 pitches, which felt really good. But I also was like, I think this is a precursor to something else. They must see something, or they saw something in scouting, in the tapes, that they were like, we're going to jump on this guy early and often, and we're going to swing a lot. And they did, and they got to him. So And this was the game that ultimately set Ben Brown back down to the minors. And I've been a big Ben Brown guy. I think from the beginning of our podcast, the beginning of the season, even last year, I had talked so much about his upside and thinking that this guy has ace potential because of the stuff that he has. But the one thing that has held him back, and one thing that I've harped on is his lack of that third pitch. I mean, you're a 2-pitch pitcher, you're a reliever. Like if you have 2 pitches and that's all you have and you do those extremely well, that's great, but you're a reliever. You can't go 5 or 6 innings with just that. And we see that with Ben Brown where, the third time through the order, the numbers, I mean, and again, this goes for a lot of pitchers in baseball. And that's why you're only seeing starters go 5 or 6 innings these days.
Yep.
That, the batting average goes up, the slug goes up, all that. But they skyrocket. And they're like, guys that face him the third time have Hall of Fame numbers. And beyond that, they're like video game numbers. So, this was the game that ultimately sent him down. You faced a really tough pitcher in Libator, who's, really, he's had an up and down season, but at that point, I think he was starting to pitch really well over his last few starts.
Scroll up a little bit and you'll see why he maybe did good because, looking at this lineup, you had Justin Turner in there and, Dansby Swanson continuing to hit 5th. And we'll get into that more as
we'll get into that. We've got plenty to say about that, but
yeah.
But yeah, so Ben goes down, and we were kind of talking about it. We were texting and, I think your thought was he should have been moved to the bullpen, and let him continue to stay up here.
What I thought should happen is I think it should be just, if they did keep him up, and maybe this could change when he comes back up, but if they did keep him up, have it be where he's the bulk guy after an opener. Because, he was the most effective in that one time that he was that.
They had the opener.
Yeah, against the Reds, I believe it was.
Yeah. Was it Pomerantz, I think, that opened for him?
It's
either Keller or Pomerantz, I think. It was either Keller or Pomerantz.
It was Keller in New York when Cade Horton made his debut. Yep. Yeah, so it was Pomerantz against the Reds. That's right.
Yeah, so my thing was send him down. He should still be a rotational piece. So that was my only thing where it's man, I'd love to see him as a high leverage guy, but again, with 2 pitches and maybe the velocity gets even better in the pen because he's not pitching, 5 or 6 innings and you're only getting an inning out of him. But for his development, I'd love to see him continue as a starter because I still think that the guy has stuff that it plays in Major League Baseball, but he definitely he needs to develop a third pitch and maybe even a fourth, and maybe not a pitch that he needs to use often, but something he can throw in there once in a while just to keep hitters guessing because, man, the 2-pitch thing is just, it's not working for him. And clearly,
what happens a lot is, hitters just start to guess and, they got a coin flip chance.
50%. 50% of the time. You're right.
Right. 80% of the pitches he throws are either the fastball or the knuckle curves. So,
yep.
Yeah.
So then, obviously they lose the second game. Tyon again continues to give up home runs in that game as well. And, the Cubs claw back, ultimately can't get to Helsley.
Well, did you want to bring up the one thing that really pissed you off in this game?
Which one? Oh, was this the, yeah. Actually, I want to make a point about that. I'm glad you brought that up because I want to backtrack to that. I'm gonna apologize, even though I never said this publicly. But I text Mike over this game on Tuesday. PCA, everyone's seen the clip. Everyone who watched the game saw it. Pete Crow Armstrong did the old Starlin Castro and or Milton Bradley, or pick your famous, your favorite Cub that just had their head in the clouds.
Yeah, I was gonna say Airhead. Yeah.
Yeah. And he forgot how many outs there were in the inning, which ultimately allowed the 8th run to score, which proved to be the game-winning run in this game. Now, had he made that out and, or had he, remember the outs, got the ball in, who knows what happens the next batter. We don't know if he would have scored on that or not. Right. We don't know the Cubs come back 7 runs, right, and get it close. We don't know if a reliever comes in and gives up the 8th run anyway, right? So all those things, I don't want to put that on him, but I was furious because to me, like, again, you're playing your division rivals. These divisional games in the summer matter, especially because like a chunk of them are right now, and then you're going to have a chunk in September again. And you don't want to get to September and, if you lose the division by one game, you look back on a game like this where it's like, he should have made that play. Now, I was texting Mike and I was saying, pull this guy, take him out of the game, make an example, all this, right? And then I was like, then I saw Craig's response, and Craig was, it happens in baseball sometimes, sometimes guys forget the outs, and, he knows what he did was wrong and he'll make it right. And I was even more furious because I want my manager to hold guys accountable. I want my manager to go in there and lay down the law and say, hey, you know what? You made a mistake. I understand. You're going to sit the next game because of this. I want you to think about what you did, and I want you to think of how it held the team back, and gave up that 8th run, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Now, what happened next was I heard Pete Crow Armstrong's interview. Mm-hmm. And he's a young kid. I mean, to me, he's a kid. He's his early 20s, right? 23, 24 years old.
Yes.
And I heard Taylor McGregor ask him, like, what are your thoughts basically on what happened, everything like that. And his answer was, I didn't play the game of baseball really well today. I wasn't very good at playing the game of baseball today. Yeah. And the pain in his voice, I was like, oh, dude, like I wanted to give the kid a hug. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I felt so bad.
Motherfuck the guy to that.
Yeah, dude, I felt so bad. And I was like, you know what? It made me think like, you know what? Maybe Craig knows his guys. And maybe Craig knew that Pete was going to be harder on himself than Craig could ever be on Pete for making that error, because Pete cares so much. And because Pete is, PCA, the kid loves baseball. You could see it when he plays. Every play, that guy is running hard. He is, he's on the outfield having fun, making every catch that shouldn't be caught. And you came to his defense really quickly to me and said, how many games did he win for the Cubs, or how many plays did he make that equaled wins? And he makes one mistake and you want to chastise him. So I'm going to publicly apologize to PCA, because he watches. I know he watches.
Yes, of course he watches. But
I know he watches.
No, I honestly, I kind of respect your attitude about it at the time, though, because like that is something that like it no matter what in that scenario, like you have to remember how many outs there are. I mean, granted, I look, not to make excuses here. It was scorching freaking hot out. I don't know how many you've been to games in St. Louis before.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah. This time last year, actually. It was around this time last year that I was there, and I was dying out there.
Right. So imagine the guys who have to wear, the dark blue in the scorching hot sun got to be out there. Now, what I think did happen, honestly, is I think Craig had his media answer. But I think behind closed doors, it was addressed in the proper manner that I think you and I would find satisfactory. But yeah, PCA, he was definitely hard on himself for it, and I think he knew it. And he later that night he came up and represented the go-ahead run, and it was never more evident to him then, I think, that like after he was stranded that. Yeah, it would be a much different game if he had been able to keep focus.
Yeah, so I'm going to backtrack. I'm sorry, Pete Crow Armstrong. I was rough on you, even though he didn't know it at the time. But, I thought his answer was, you could hear it in his voice. I really felt really bad for the kid, to be honest, afterwards. It was like, ouch, man, he really he sounds so down. And I was like, all right, pick yourself back up. Let's go out tomorrow. And they did. They won. This was a great game to watch for us. 8-0 win. Matthew Boyd looked phenomenal. Beat up on an old Chicago pitcher as well too.
Eric Fetty, yeah.
Eric Fetty.
Who I want to say last year in that trade, the White Sox got nothing back from the Cardinals for that trade.
Yeah, right.
Because it was like a 3-team trade, and I think everything they got was from the Dodgers, not the Cardinals.
Yeah, they probably got Jerry Reinsdorf's favorite trade. What do you call this? Favorite acquisition? Cash considerations?
Yeah, exactly.
Which, I mean, he just got that with the Bulls recently.
But in the draft, right?
Yeah, so then you've got Imanaga, who went, right after and looked, and I will say this: he didn't look his sharpest. He looked really good. I don't think he looked like the Imanaga we saw at the beginning of the year, even last year. But even that version of Imanaga is really good, and I think he even admitted that he probably didn't feel his sharpest. Coming out, and he looked damn good. I mean, they gave up 3 hits the entire game. Offense, really didn't get much going, but, didn't need much, when you had Imanaga going and Palencia shut it down. And that was also the game where an old friend had some fireworks at the end of the game.
Yeah, he did. That was, Wilson Contreras going nuts again. Not a real shocker to everyone around here, I'm sure, especially if you had been around the Cubs clubhouse in the years he was there. Because I think we talked about it on a podcast last year about some report that Kaplan had about him like smashing some equipment after like a bad loss or something like that.
And that's what made the Cubs tired of him. They said that the Cubs were tired of the I don't know, the anger management issues. I don't know if that's what you want to call it, but
I mean, look, I will always love Wilson for the years he had here, especially, coming up as a rookie and proven himself to be worthy of being in the same catcher group as, David Ross and Miguel Montero, who were both really good defensive catchers. At the same time, I'm very glad. It was one that I was 50-50 on when they let him go in 2022. I think at this point today, I think we can safely say it was the right call to let him go, especially now that he's
not even playing catcher.
He's not catching anymore. And earlier in this game at first base, he had a little bit of a PCA moment involving PCA when Dansby Swanson first and third, PCA was at third. Dansby Swanson gets hung up in the rundown. It was intentional, and PCA was allowed to score from that. Wilson Contreras was the one who got thrown the ball, did not throw home on it. And, that allowed the Cubs to score pretty easy and, could have been an important insurance run.
Well, after that blow up, Wilson, much like me, went back and apologized for showing his anger, which, he admitted that he's like, hey, I know Palencia's not trying to hit me in that spot. Heat of the moment, and again, he said it's hot as hell out there. So I get it. Guys are definitely feeling that heat. And Palencia in that spot, definitely not trying to put any more guys on base, right? Like you basically at that point, he was the putting him on base, the tying run was at the plate at that point then.
Yeah.
So it's like,
because it was Burleson led off with a double, and then it was Wilson, and he had him on a 1-2 count.
With no outs.
1-2, with nobody out. You're not trying to hit someone there.
Right. And I get it. Again, it's hot as hell. Someone's, you almost get hit with 101 mile per hour fastball. Probably, not going to make you super happy. But, in that moment, Daniel, Palencia, obviously not trying to hit him. But then after the last out, Palencia puts him on, gets 3 straight outs. Had some choice words for Wilson as he turned around to celebrate and directed some towards his way. And then that cleared the benches. And, thankfully nothing escalated from there because we got an upcoming series with St. Louis again. But they both went back and they said, hey, you know what? It's all squashed. It's all good. But we'll see. We'll see if
this is true. Yeah.
Wilson may say one thing, but we'll see how the Cardinals rotation feels, coming up here too. So we'll know, I think, probably the first couple at bats that Kyle Tucker or PCA come up to bat. We'll figure out what they're about.
For sure.
All right. So we went through, the Ben Brown stuff. We talked about, let's talk about the Houston series, right? You've got, and this had so many different moving parts to this series, the 2016, 2017 World Series winners. I'll still never forget Dallas Keuchel's famous quote saying, "We're not the Cubs."
Oh God, yes, fuck that guy, man.
And then also not being on the team. I totally
forgot about that until now. Yeah,
I have not. I keep receipts, my friend, and I remember that. And then wasn't even on the team much longer after that because he just absolutely shit the bed with his career, right? And ended up going to the White Sox as his penance. So, it's going to be interesting. But then, this series obviously was really interesting because you had the big trade in the offseason was Kyle Tucker going to the Cubs in exchange for Cam Smith, top prospect, rookie third baseman that was drafted in the first round in 2024, along with Isaac Paredes, who was the third baseman that the Cubs had acquired last year at the trade deadline. So they traded 2 third basemen to Houston. Cam Smith ended up cracking the roster right out of spring training after having a really great spring training with Houston. They moved him to right field. He's having a pretty good year to start off the year. So this is a big series. Kyle Tucker's homecoming, Ryan Presley's homecoming as well.
Yep, exactly. I mean, Cam Smith, hell, like for the few amount of minor league games he has played, before getting called up to the majors and being a full-time guy there, like doing very well for himself. Like obviously, he's not going to be winning an MVP this year. That might be something in his future, but for a guy with as little experience as he does, pretty good numbers to start this year. And as we will see, it tore us apart this series too.
Yeah, it's crazy too because I was looking at this before the season, before the series started. And at this point, he only had 6 home runs. He's batting 271, I think, coming into the series. So I was like, okay, he's hitting pretty well. I mean, he's putting the ball in play. He's not really hitting for a ton of power, but he looked like he was having a pretty good rookie season. And then he goes on this power tear, along with Isaac Paredes, who, this guy's got 16 home runs on the year coming into this series.
Right.
I felt like this guy. I mean, looking at the 3 games, I felt like they never got him out. I was like,
no, they didn't. Well, when we talk about the last game of the series, I mean, he was basically the reason why Jameson Taillon's start lasted as short as it did, because in the at-bats against him, I think he had 3 of them, and they were all 10 pitches. He was fouling off pitch after pitch after pitch, which sadly never really did that as a Cub, which,
which I want to put up right up here because you get to see the splits here where Isaac Paredes hit 223 with the Cubs in the half year that he came back to us.
Yeah, he was
so
not
beautiful
good
thing watching him.
Yeah, and I want to say
3 home runs.
At
3.
I want to say at Wrigley Field. I'll give credit to my other podcast co-host Andy Dolan for this nugget. I remember last year he had. And when he got traded to the Cubs, in the games he played at Wrigley Field, he had a slugging percentage that was under 200. He was god awful at Wrigley. And the whole narrative around him is that he's someone who pulls the ball a lot and hits a lot of home runs that just get over the fence and parks that are shorter down the line. The Crawford boxes are perfect for him. Wrigley Field, I think, Wrigley Field has the furthest down the line distance of any park in baseball, and it was never that great. So in a way, I don't know that he'd be having the same success if he was here, but definitely happy to have him be part of the Kyle Tucker trade.
Yeah, and I think I don't know about you. I don't know how you feel about it. I'm still not mad about the trade. I think even if Cam Smith becomes a really good player, Kyle Tucker's a top 10 player in baseball. Correct. I think he's a top 10 player in all of baseball right now. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like for the Cubs in the offseason. But this first game they end up losing 7-4. Cam Smith hits a home run, Paredes hits a home run. They both go yard. Tucker doesn't have the best game until this game, which was again a really great delight to see.
Yes.
Colin Ray kind of settled down a little bit. He only gave up 2 runs in the third inning, and then it was pretty good. Outside of that, and I want to say this was the game in the 8th inning. I forgot who hit it, but it was off Porter Hodge, who came in a low leverage, because he's just coming back from injury.
I think that it was ball, Paredes.
Was it Paredes? He had just hit it, and they called it 328 feet, but that I think the foul pole was 315.
Right.
And they called it 328. It hit the bottom of the foul pole where I was like, there's no way that's 328. That's 316, 317 max.
Exactly.
I mean, It's a little league home run. I mean, it literally like feels like little leaguers who hit farther, for power than that, So, and I think Porter Hodge looked at it like, what that's a pop up, like how did that get out?
Yeah, if that same ball gets hit at Wrigley Field, that's a routine fly ball to Ian Happ.
Yeah, and I believe Michael Barrett victim, AJ Pierzynski even said it in that game. He was like, that's a home run in one of 31 ballparks, so it was the only ballpark that ball's getting out of there. So, I mean, it's probably around the same distance as the Yankees right field porch. It's
exactly right.
Real low, real short.
I want to say shortest down the line was the place where Paredes was before the Cubs, was in Tampa, although that stadium's out of commission right now. But he does well in short distances, and then doesn't exactly get it over in a place like Wrigley.
And then they go on to face Framber Valdez, and they just absolutely get stymied against the lefty. Again, they're I want to say they're 13-14 against left-handers this year, which is wild to me to even think about. Which I think is going to lead us into our next topic,
right? About the lineup.
And the next thing that we want to bitch about, the lineup, Craig's lineup. We saw a lot in the past, few weeks. Dansby Swanson, who is probably at this point hitting right around his weight, if that, probably below his weight at this point.
I was going to say maybe around Mallory's weight at this point.
Oh, seriously, right?
Yeah.
I feel like
she's pregnant, so that's a little higher now, but
yeah, congratulations to the Swansons.
Right.
Before we shit all over Dansby hitting fourth. And I don't know, like I thought about this more and more because like you and I have been, bitching about this for weeks now, like seeing Swanson hit anything above six, I think anything above seventh in the order is what I said to you. Like, I don't want to see Dansby anywhere above seventh.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought about it more and more, and it's like they've been so bad against lefties, and they're trying to, and I can see why they're trying to stack the righties at the top of the lineup. I think this might have less to do with Craig's lineup and more so the construction of the roster and the lack of bench that they have, because you have Justin Turner batting righty coming off the bench, who's hitting nothing. What is Birdie? What does Birdie bat? I'm sorry.
Like low 200s, if I had to guess, probably like 220 or something like that.
He's hitting 209 right now. Right. He's trying to pull up the stats right now with John Birdie. So John Birdie bats right as well. So you're not getting much power from him, off the bench either. He's got no home runs this year. Barely have 18 hits.
The only effective bench bat you have every game is whoever is not starting at catcher these days. I mean, it's a good point. You've got Vidal Brujan, who's coming off the bench as well too. He's batting righty. You're not getting much from him off the bench. He's batting $156. Justin Turner's hitting probably right about 200. I mean, all three guys below the Mendoza line, right? So, it's like, where do you maybe, if that's the case, do you maybe move PCA leading off against lefties, but then you're almost getting an automatic out to move Ian Happ down further batting righty? I mean, what do you do in that spot? I don't know. I mean, Ian Happ, I think, has been slightly better against lefties than he has righties this year. Mm-hmm. A couple things. One, we got to end this stupid charade of benching Michael Busch against lefties when he's been a top 15 hitter in baseball this year by WRC plus, and Craig continues to not let him face lefties. And I get it. The splits are what they are, but it's also like a way lower amount of plate appearances he's getting against lefties too. I don't imagine he would be any worse than what Justin Turner's overall numbers are against left-handed, like overall numbers. If you had Michael Busch face left-handed pitching, those numbers can't possibly be worse than what Justin Turner's overall numbers are. I don't think so. Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up here to see what they are, because we've been harping on this for a while now with just letting Michael Busch go. Yeah. I mean, having a great year again. I mean, 273 on base of 363. I mean, OPS,
is sitting at 875. His OPS plus at 150.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
That's someone who should be playing every freaking day. And
every day.
I cannot stress this enough. When he was with the Dodgers in AAA, if you look at his splits from that last year, 2023 AAA with the Dodgers, I know AAA is a lot different than the majors, but he hit 284 and had a 795 OPS against lefties in AAA with the Dodgers. I don't think it's unreasonable to think he could get like a 700-ish OPS against lefties, and you take that 100 times out of 100 over what you're getting from Justin Turner when you start.
So him. Michael Busch is hitting 105 against lefties. He's hitting 303 against righties. But the one thing I will say for Michael Busch is he's only had 38 at-bats against left-handers this year.
There you go. Yeah.
And I think also, the splits at home are a little bit different than they are in away. I mean, away he's batting .048 on the road against lefties. He's batting 176 against lefties at home too. So I think, ballpark obviously going to make a little bit of a difference there. But even just let's look back at 2004. 2004, he hit 258 against lefties and 246 against righties. So, and he had 89 at bats last year against lefties. So I think, the bad numbers might be more of a byproduct of him, to your point, not getting enough at bats against lefties, and you're not seeing enough left-handed pitching to put you in a groove where you're going to start, recognizing pitches and being able to hit them. So I agree. I mean, Michael Busch has to be an everyday player in my mind. Because I agree. I mean, you're not going to get worse than, Turner, Bruhan, or Birdie, whoever you throw out there.
And listen, if you really don't like him that much against lefties, you can always hit him like lower in the lineup if you want to. He's hitting sixth on a regular basis. Maybe drop him down to 7 or 8 if you really think it's that
if you're putting
bad.
Dansby at 4th or 5th, then what's the harm of putting him, 7th at that point?
Exactly. And you're also getting a much better glove too with Busch than you would be with Turner at first base.
What about this though? What if you when you're facing a lefty, you put Michael Busch batting 2nd and putting Tucker batting 3rd, where now he has a little bit of protection in front of him where it's like you've got Ian Happ leading off, you're going, lefty again with with Michael Busch, and he's got Tucker as protection right behind him. I feel like that might set him up for more success when you've got a hitter like that. Or maybe you're putting Tucker 2nd, Busch 3rd, with Seiya hitting 4th.
Possibly, but I know a big thing for Craig is like he never wants to have two lefties back to back with each other because of a late game scenario where you could bring a left-handed reliever in to face both those guys. And I mean, granted, Tucker does actually hit pretty well against lefties. Busch, in a small sample size does not, but that could increase as the year goes on. But I mean, it's a nice thought. I would like to see it happen, but it's hard for me to say it when, Craig has done this all year. And then, the other big problem I think we have is like how high Dansby Swanson has been hitting too. And it's crazy because there was a solid 2-3 week stretch where he was consistently hitting 7th or 8th, and he was putting up really good numbers in that spot too. It's like, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. It's been frustrating. I think that's probably been a big talking point too, but I think that brings us up into our next topic here. What do the Cubs need to do? I know we saw a couple comments earlier here. Brett here said realistically, if they're going to make a run, they need to address the pitching. We agree with that. We're not disagreeing there. Peter here said they really need to address the rotation and the bench. Again, these guys have already they probably read our agenda before we even started talking, or either that or read our minds. But, what moves do you want to see them make? I know we obviously talked about rotational pieces. I think they need at least 2 starters. They need, middle of the order guy. And I think they need a top of the rotation guy, and I think there's been some rumors out there that, they've been talking to the Pirates deep into talks with them for Mitch Keller. I thought that could be interesting. I think Sandy Alcantara's name gets floated a lot too, coming out of Miami. Edward Cabrera is another name out of Miami that's come up a lot. I think Seth Lugo, depending on where, Kansas City goes from here, if they think they have a realistic shot of catching the Tigers or a wild card spot. So, I mean, what do you want to see? What do you think?
I'm right on board with you in rotation, although I'm not all that high on Sandy Alcantara this year. Like he
really,
I not to say that like he can't eventually bounce back, but like, the big problem for him has been walks this year. Like they're way higher than they were before he had Tommy John, and maybe that could just be an adjustment of coming back from Tommy John. But like, I don't know how well of, if he can make that sort of adjustment by, the end of this season. That is one guy that I would maybe consider like over the off season taking a look at, and, maybe getting a full spring training with Tommy Hotovy and Tyler Zombro and all the Cubs pitching gurus, to work with him while they're in Arizona. Mitch Keller is a name I do like, and he's a guy who, like, you might not like this because you want guys that strike out a lot of guys. The thing that I'm looking for is guys who give up a lot of ground balls that maybe would go for hits where they're currently at, but with Dansby, Nico, Busch, Matt Shaw behind him, those balls get turned into outs. I think Mitch Keller is a prime example of that. He's a really good ground ball pitcher. He's like the most like bad luck pitcher this year too, by the way, if you look at win-loss record.
Yeah, because of the run support just being awful.
Right, exactly.
I like, and I wanted to put up Sandy Alcantara's numbers, and I feel like this sucks because had we recorded this maybe like a couple days earlier, we're having a different conversation here. Sandy Alcantara had a pretty good month of June up until the 28th, and he got absolutely rocked. I'm going to put this up here on the screen here. So he had four starts in a row where he gave up 3 runs or less, quality starts, almost quality starts. He went, one game, he only went 5 innings.
Hey, against Philly, that's fine. Philly's a good team. 100
pitches too. I mean, that's tough. And then he got rocked against Arizona. He gave up 7 runs on 10 hits this past, Saturday. So, yeah, I still think that there's something there. I still think that, coming off Tommy John's, the one thing that I do like about that he just came off Tommy John's is that you don't have to worry about him hopefully having Tommy John sooner than later, right? Because I think like this is a pitcher that, when you watch a guy, I think like Paul Skeens, Mizorowski, like these are guys that you're like, man, these guys hit 100-some miles per hour. They're probably going to have Tommy John at least once or twice.
Yep.
And again, it's not the injury that cripples a guy anymore. That like it used to be like in the 80s or 90s, right? Where it's like they had Tommy John's, their career was done.
Right.
Now there's guys that they have 1 or 2. Look at Tyon had it twice. Justin Steele is on his second Tommy John, and guys come back now, but it does take them time to get back. So I do like the stuff that Sandy has, and to your point, he's going to be playing in front, of a better defense. So, maybe don't feel the need to have to like whip it to 100 miles per hour all the time and pitch into some soft contact and let your defense do some work for you. So,
I mean,
pitch lab too.
Right. Pitch lab could help with that. Although he didn't walk anyone his last start, but that was at Arizona. I don't know.
Yeah. Walks come down a little bit.
The
5 in June.
The 7 runs and the 6.98 ERA though, that's red flag for me. And like, I'm looking here, like the last column on the right that shows like ground outs versus air outs. Like, probably want that a little bit higher, but
yeah,
but
I like
if the price,
23 strikeouts to 5 walks
for sure. I mean, if the price is right for him, but like that's not someone I want to give up a Owen Casey or maybe someone down, maybe someone lower down. But like I need to see a little more success to.
So
really drop
who's your wish list then? Because I think another name that came up that was pretty interesting to hear too was a guy that the Cubs sought after and made an offer in the offseason, because we all know that third base has really not been we're not getting any power out of third base at all.
Right.
I mean, Matt Shaw came back. He's hitting a little bit better. But when you look at the peripherals, his barrel rate is really low. He's got one of the lowest exit velos in all of baseball. He's not squaring the ball up. A lot of his hits have been probably a little bit more luck than they've been, due to, squaring the ball up, so third base still feels like it hasn't been fully fixed, even though I do like the defense that he's provided there. Yeah. But if you trade for third base, he's probably going in that trade, or even pitching. I think like Matt Shaw's probably going to be the guy that goes in that. So, I think Eugenio Suarez was somebody that has been brought up, but Alex Bregman's name came up in the rumor mill too. Could he be available? Somebody brought it up. I think Jesse Rogers was talking about it with Boston deciding like, are they in it? Are they not? Could Alex Bregman potentially be sold off because Boston's trying to clear some cap and maybe reboot for next year, get some more prospects?
Well, is there any sort of like option after this year for him, or is it like a year deal?
There is an option. He's got an option, I believe, after every year. He also has a no trade clause, I believe, which I think he would waive if it were to come to Chicago, because I think that was a team that was on the list that, finalists for the offer. Right. He probably would opt out, which I think at that point you'd probably be okay with, because this is a year that you're trying to go all in. And if he doesn't, it's a safety net in case Kyle Tucker does walk.
Yeah.
Let's say you into Alex Bregman, maybe throwing in an Aroldis Chapman in there too, bringing him back too.
I need to see Chapman's numbers, but last we saw what ERA?
Sub 2. He's got like a 170 something, I believe.
All right. Well, okay, that's pretty good. I'm worried about an aging pitcher like him, but still
he's 37. Yeah,
but
37 years old. I believe it's just the rest of this year. He's got a 132 ERA. He's only given up 5 runs over 37 games pitched this year.
With Bregman, I kind of have, and I said this over the offseason when, it was rumored the Cubs were in on him. I had the same concerns with him that I kind of do, when we talked about Paredes in the Astros series, that like he is someone who maybe benefits a little bit more from, playing in a place like Fenway Park where you can just pepper the wall. However, looking at his numbers this year, he has actually been much better on the road than at home. He's got a 991 OPS on the road this year. I mean, to me, it's like, do you trust that he can stay healthy for the rest of this year? Because was this today his first game off the IL? Like he did have a pretty lengthy IL stint, I know. But I mean, yeah, I would love to have Alex Bregman, but there are a couple factors I wonder about with that. One, is Jed going to be willing to part with Matt Shaw in a trade like that after giving up Cam Smith in the offseason, who probably would have been the backup plan? And you don't have as sexy of a name in the minors.
Do we still got Ed Howard in the minors?
Oh God, no. Yeah, still in Double-A, I want to say. Doubt we'll ever see him. There is a guy in Iowa though, Jonathan Long, who's like someone that Craig actually raved about in spring training. Probably doesn't have the upside that a Shaw or a Smith have, but and then the other thing too is like, would the Red Sox really be willing to make that trade when, they went through all the crap they did with Devers at this point? And
I mean, they're gonna get shit regardless. And I think like if they're not in it, you got to sell pieces for prospects at this point, right? You got to rebuild a little bit. Right. Especially if Bregman's probably going to walk, opt out again after this year because he's having a pretty good year. So you get something for him.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a mystery though. Like what does it look like for him after this year? Because like I guess with Bregman, you kind of got to wait and see between like what he does between now and like the first, maybe between now and the All-Star break. If he keeps up the pace that he was on before going on the injured list, then you maybe give Boston a call, because then they'd probably be more inclined to trade him. Whereas if he does struggle and, doesn't think he could make similar money to what he got from Boston on the open market, he's probably staying in Boston at that point.
Yeah. How about Suarez and Merrill Kelly as a combination?
Okay. I'm glad you said Merrill Kelly and not Zach Gallen. Merrill Kelly, I would love to have, yes, and Eugenio Suarez as well too. Get a really good glove at third base too, which you kind of, not to the same level with Shaw at this point, but like you'd probably get a slight upgrade there. You'll get a lot of home runs, and a guy who, granted, a lot of it was off Cubs pitching, but loves very Wrigley, well at Wrigley Field. Yes.
He loves Wrigley Field. And you know what? We also get to hear Pat Hughes say his name 4 times a game.
Oh man,
that would be the added benefit, right?
Yes, that's maybe the one thing we kind of miss from letting Wilson Contreras go, is Pat always saying Wilson
Contreras.
Yeah, and Eugenio Suarez. Yeah, that would be Pat Hughes' dream, to have him be a Cub.
Yeah, it's so I think Kelly could be interesting. I know we talked about let's see. I think we talked about Kelly. Yeah, Zach. I know we know Zach Gallen is up there. Mitch Keller we talked about. We talked about Seth Lugo as being an option that could be interesting.
I got a name for you as someone maybe a little lower on the list, but like we do need to kind of address the bench somewhat. And going back to Boston, I think one guy that they may be considering moving, who he's been someone in a starting role this year because of an injury early on to Tristan Casas. But I discussed this with Peter, who's in our comments in recent days, that one guy I could see them going after is Romy Gonzalez. He hits lefties very well, former White Sox. He can play all over the infield, play pretty much anywhere. Has played mostly first because, again, it's kind of been a necessity for the Red Sox with Casas out, and then Devers not really being willing to play there. So that's one guy I have my eyes on. Like I'm looking for someone to potentially be like a competent enough hitter against lefties to play at first if, Craig continues not wanting to play Michael Busch against lefties. Sox do have some arms for sale.
I was going to say, what about Adrian Hauser? That could be an interesting arm to add.
You know what, too? I just had a conversation with another friend of mine about this, too. I should have told you this. But, like, the Sox have so many, like, ex-Brewers arms. And I wonder if that's, like, a strategic thing for them, being in the same town as where Craig Counsell is managing. And a lot of those guys that pitched for Craig Counsell, like, maybe, he goes to Jed and say, hey, they're right here. They wouldn't have to move. I know these guys. I'd be on board with Adrian Hauser and Aaron Savale, or, I would love to get Shane Smith, but I don't think they're moving him anytime soon.
No, they're not moving him. He's probably their lone all-star this year.
Probably, yeah.
All right. Well, let's any other targets that you wanted to talk about? I know we got to get moving here, but
outside of what I said with Romy Gonzalez, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about this. I know you brought this up over the weekend. David Kaplan made some comments, and you've been trying to sell me on this whole thing that, hopefully Kyle Tucker falls in love with Chicago, and his agent isn't Scott Boras, and I think we said it was Dansby Swanson's agent. They share the agent,
right? That sounds right.
So there's some good relationship, good goodwill between Jed and that agent. But yeah, go ahead and share your thoughts here, because I've been on the line of like, hey, this is a one and done for Tucker, and I just don't see him playing for the Cubs beyond this year.
I mean, in before I sent you the David Kaplan video, there was also another post in an interview he did with Marquis on like a pregame show, I want to say, where he talked about like how he thinks the Cubs are like built to win for the future, that like, they have a lot of good young guys and a lot of guys, in the minors that will be coming up behind him. And, he's someone who I like have heard him say a lot of positive things about playing for the Cubs, more so than maybe like any, guy who's due to be a free agent after this year. So, I mean, I don't know if this is his number one destination. He's not from here. He's from, I think, Florida, but I don't think either of those teams are going to be on him. I think obviously the two big money teams that you'd expect to be going after him would be the Yankees or the Dodgers, maybe the Mets in there too, maybe the Phillies in there too. I do think after seeing Cap's video that like the Cubs are going to be in a position where like they're going to make an offer to him that I don't know if it's going to be the best one, but it will be one that like will be worthy of him. And I'm hoping that, and this is just my suspicion, it's going to be sometime after the trade deadline where like an offer is going to be made to him, I think.
Okay.
I think they realize that like if they let him go to the open market, that their chances of re-signing him are very slim at that point, even more than the slim chances that they already are. But I think maybe the biggest obstacle right now for Ricketts and Jed Hoyer at this point in re-signing him is, do you remember last year after the trade deadline, the Cubs wound up being like very slightly over the luxury tax? And like that being like a huge thing that Tom Ricketts was complaining about, because of course he is. Yeah. I'm thinking once they know exactly what their finances look like for the rest of the season and, exactly what money they're committing to for the rest of the season, and also can, kind of project like, is this team solidly a playoff team and what kind of revenue that's going to generate? I think an offer will be made to Kyle Tucker. Will he take it? I don't know. But I think an offer that will be one that, will probably be similar to what he's getting in the offseason will be made to him at that point.
Okay. Well, I love your optimism. I still am on the side of, I think this is a one and done year. I'd be shocked that Ricketts opens up the wallet at all for any free agent like that for that many years, because it just hasn't been their MO for, ever. So we'll see. I mean, I'm hoping you're right. Trust me. I want you to be right more than I want me to be right. So
for sure. I'll just say one more thing to add to this too. They obviously this wasn't as a big money contract, but I mentioned this to you when I was texting you about this a couple nights ago. There was an instant pretty recently in which fans were clamoring for the Cubs to sign a guy, and they did it with Cody Bellinger, and they, maybe not the exact amount of money, but did pay a pretty hefty AAV for him on that contract. So
they did.
We'll see where it goes.
But they also couldn't trade him fast enough to the Yankees for nothing, because they were trying to dump that salary. So to be fair, they, and I think the other side of it too, that I think you're not mentioning, is that he was signed really late into the off season, where it was maybe a month before spring training. I think he signed in February because nobody else was out there giving him the money that he wanted. And I think was it last year when Scott Boras had like 3 clients that they went into February and just didn't get the long-term deals they got, or they wanted. So
Jordan Montgomery was one of them too. I remember.
Yeah. So, I mean, they did give him the money. It still came at a discount because he waited so long to sign, and then they couldn't ship him out fast enough to dump him off the books because, Tom didn't want to spend that money long-term. So again, I hope you're right. I hope Tucker is a Cub till he retires. I would love to see that. He's been great for the team. I think one of the things that gets that's probably the most underrated aspect of Kyle Tucker is how good Seiya Suzuki has been this year because of Kyle Tucker.
Yeah.
You know, I think Seiya Suzuki's got 21 home runs, 67 RBIs. I think he's having the best year of his Cub career because he's had Kyle Tucker hitting in front of him. He's had PCA hitting behind him.
Well, and he's had Kyle Tucker playing his spot in the field where he can just focus on hitting, you know, as a whole at that point.
Yeah. All right. Next round of All-Star voting. Speaking of Kyle Tucker with PCA and Carson Kelly, who was one of the you thought two catchers were going, obviously before Amaya got hurt.
I mean, I thought it was a slim
might have been on pace.
Yes. Yeah. Pretty good. I mean, PCA and Kyle Tucker felt like locks. Carson Kelly did kind of like slip up a little bit after April, but like has heated up the last few games as well, like last few weeks, really. And again, my main point in all this was like Cubs catchers as a whole had been like a really good positional group. And I thought that like there wasn't any sort of way that they were going to go without having one of them there. Unless, of course, the only scenario was if, you know, the Rockies catcher Hunter Goodman has had a pretty good year as well, too. And I thought that like if that's going to be their one All-Star, it would kind of be fitting. But you know, Carson Kelly, you look at his overall numbers, he's like right up there at the top with like all the rest of at least the National League catchers. Doesn't exactly come close to the numbers that Cal Raleigh's putting up, but, you know, hard to reach that.
Yeah. All right. On this date. All right. I'm going to see if I could get you here. All right. Let me pull this up here. All right. So on this date, and I mean, if you're a Cubs fan, you'll remember this. The day was 6/30, 1998. This was the summer of Sammy.
Interesting.
On this date, 6/30, 1998, Sammy Sosa hit his 20th home run of June. Not the year, of June. He batted .298. He had 20 home runs and 40 RBIs with a 1.1 something OPS in the month of June. Okay.
Pretty good.
It was his 33rd home run of the year. This was the infamous, home run chase, chasing Roger Maris at this point, at that point in time, because, Barry Bonds hadn't hit his, 70, whatever it was, a few years later. But Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa basically saved baseball in 1998. On this date, the Cubs played the Arizona Diamondbacks. Okay. Sammy Sosa hit the home run off of Alan Embry, who was a reliever. He was a reliever in this game.
Yeah. Later with the 04 Red Sox, I want to say.
Yep. Willie Blair was the starter, who went 6 2/3, gave up 3 runs. Whatever. Didn't give up the home run to Sammy. Alan Embry did. Who was the starting pitcher for the Chicago Cubs in that game? Now I'm going to give you some hints here because it's so hard to remember specifically that starter of that game.
You're talking about a time when I was 3 years old, but like I do know, looking back on like the baseball reference pages and everything, I know the 98 Cubs fairly well.
Okay. So this pitcher started his career with the St. Louis Cardinals before moving on to the Cleveland Indians. He ended up pitching for the Mets right before he came to the Chicago Cubs in 1997. He pitched 2 years with the Cubs. He went 9-14 that year with a 4.84 ERA. The year prior, he went 6-1 with the Cubs with a 2.86 ERA. Now, granted, that was only in 9 starts. Mm-hmm. And then he wrapped up his career with the Texas Rangers for 2 more years before retiring. He was a right-hander. He was born in Havana, Illinois.
Oh, wow. Where the hell's that at? Jeez.
I would probably have to guess somewhere closer to Springfield, I think. It was closer to Springfield. So he got drafted by the Cardinals, which probably was his team if he lived in Springfield.
Yeah. So
this picture.
So you said the Cubs got this guy in 97 from the Mets, right?
97. He came over from the Mets. He pitched 97. He started the season with the Mets in 97. He came over, I want to say, at the trade deadline.
Do you have the full trade up? Because there is a trade that sticks out from that year with the Mets that I know of. I want to say it's how they got the guy who would become the leadoff hitter of that 98 team.
All right, so he was traded to the Chicago Cubs, completing a trade that sent Lance Johnson and Manny Alexander to Chicago in exchange for Brian McRae, Mel Rojas, and Turk Wendell.
Yes. Wow, that's a real name of 90s baseball players right there. All right, I have a name in my head, and I'm like 80% sure it's right.
Okay.
I want to say this guy became like really, really important for the Cubs down the stretch because like he was like both starting and relieving and like getting used like damn near every day, basically. Was it Terry Mulholland?
Terry Mulholland closed that game. So he did pitch in that game. He was not a starter.
Okay. Starter.
But that's a hell of a guess, yeah.
So all right. Let me just think about the rotation from that year. Because obviously you got Kerry Wood, you had Steve Traxel start the game 163 against the Giants. Mm-hmm. You had, oh my God, you had who's the longtime guy that was like with the Twins in the late 80s, early 90s? Kevin Tapani.
Yep.
I think like
Traxel, Tapani, Kerry Wood.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think oh man, I'm trying to think of the starting pitchers of this year.
There's one name I have in my mind, and I want to say he was like
Jeremy Gonzalez was the other one.
Jeremy Gonzalez, yes, okay.
It was Jeremy Gonzalez was the other starter, so it's not this guy. So the four starters were Tapani, Traxel, Kerry Wood, Jeremy Gonzalez. Who is the fifth starter of that rotation? That was the guy who started.
I want to say this is the same guy who started game 1 of the playoffs that year against the Braves. Mark Clark. Is that who it is?
You got it. Yeah, it's Mark Clark.
Let's go. Nice.
I thought I had you. Well, you're an encyclopedia of baseball, Cubs names. It's unreal, man.
I mean, if it's someone who started a pretty significant game for the Cubs, it's not hard to nail down. I just wasn't sure exactly what that Cubs-Mets trade, which pitcher it was. I knew it was Clark and Mulholland were the two names I was thinking of as far as who they would have gotten that trade.
All right, let's wrap up here. We got flying the W's and taking the L's.
Hello, you play to win the game.
Addison is next. Doors open on the left at Addison.
I say one thing. Go. Let's go. That's a W. That's E1. That's E1. That's a W.
It's a L7 winning.
All right. I'll let you kick off. What you got for your W's or your L's this week?
All right. I got two W's. One of them, and I don't even know if you believe in this sort of thing, and I don't know if the people in the comments believe in this sort of thing, but I'm going to give a W to something that may or may not exist, but the baseball gods get a W for giving us that rain out against the Brewers so the Cubs did not have to face Jacob Mizorowski in that series, because the Cubs had been screwed over so much in every Pirates series since Paul Skeens has been called up, where they have faced him every single freaking time. And the last time they played him was a 4-game series, so kind of hard to really avoid him in that sort of series. But W to the baseball gods for giving the Cubs a break, especially in the middle of this amazing stretch that Jacob Mizorowski is on, where the first 11 innings he pitched in the big leagues, he didn't allow a hit, which is unheard of.
Yeah. All right. I like that. That's a pretty good W. I'm gonna give myself a W because I'm actually I won't be on the show next week. I've got two things going on next week, which one I know you'll love, the other I don't know how much, but so Monday I'm actually going to go see Wu-Tang Clan They're going to be at the,
nice.
They're going to be at the United Center. This is their final farewell tour, at least with all the OG original members of the clan. So that's going to be freaking awesome. I can't wait. And then either Tuesday or Wednesday, I will be in Minneapolis for work, and I will be attending a Cubs Twins game.
Oh, that's right. They do play right before the All-Star break there. That is right. I actually, earlier this year in April, me and my Uncle Paul, who is a big White Sox fan, went to a White Sox Twin series up there. My first time at that ballpark, and it's really, really nice up there. Minnesota.
I love it. It's a great park.
Yeah.
It's a great park. I also have one more W I got to get. So this week, I know we're obviously celebrating Independence Day on Friday. This Thursday is actually my wife and myself's anniversary. So it's our 9th wedding anniversary. Nice. So shout out to my wife for putting up with me for 9 years of marriage and, a couple of years before that. So she, we were living in Pittsburgh at the time when we met. That's where I met her. And, I think it's funny because, she is not a baseball fan whatsoever. And when we first started dating, one of the things I told her is, hey, listen, when the Cubs play, this is what I do. I watch Cubs baseball once. It's 162. I watch every game I could possibly. The games that I miss are because I'm at work and I can't watch them. Right? If I'm not at work, that's what I'm doing. If it's a Friday night, if it's a Tuesday night, if it's a Sunday night, whatever they're playing, I'm going to be at home watching the game. Right? We started dating in 2014, so nice. They were pretty bad in 2014. And then 2015 was the rise of Cubdom, I guess, if you will, the Theo years. So she was with me through all that, and she was like, "Oh, this is actually pretty exciting. This is I could see why you get into this." And then came the sweep of the Mets in the 2015 NLCS, and she was like, she was feeling some of the heartbreak, and she's like, "Oh, this is so heartbreaking. How do you deal with this?" And I'm like, girl, you've been doing this for a year. Like, I've been doing this for 30 years at this point.
Right. You know how long the drought's been?
Yeah. Right. This is nothing. I was like, this is not even 2003 bad. Trust me. Like, you don't know. And then lo and behold, we get married in 2016, and that's the year that the Cubs win the World Series. So happy 9-year anniversary to my wife. Happy 9-year to the World Series Cubs, right?
There you go. Perfect. It was a match made in heaven.
Great year.
Yeah, absolutely. Other W, also baseball related. This will be quick, but Cubs bullpen over the course of basically since that last Seattle game at Wrigley, it's been super dominant. Other than the cheap home run that Isaac Paredes got against Porter Hodge the other night in Houston, have not allowed a run. And that has been in a lot of games where like the starters have not gone very deep into games. You've had, Jameson Taillon twice fail to go 5 innings. Ben Brown, give up a lot of runs and everything like that. Shōta Imanaga, even in a pretty damn good start in his first start off the IL, was probably on a pitch count and only went 5 innings in that. So they've been asked to do a lot. Only one run allowed in the 9th inning of Sunday's game. So Cubs bullpen, always a big question mark for it on this show. W to you.
All right, nice. I've got 3 L's. I'm going to go really quickly, rapid fire here, because 2 of them, they're very consistent. Okay. Aaron Rodgers, always. Going
bums.
to the Steelers. Yeah, going to the Steelers. The bums still owing us from last year. We're about to come up on the next Cubs Sox rivalry, and they still haven't paid us back. So,
right.
If you're going to join their show next, make sure that you write in their comments for any of our listeners. If you're listening to us, bum them, because they still owe us. They need to sit in Cubs gear, because we went double or nothing on that year too.
Exactly.
And the Cubs swept the White Sox completely last year. So they are supposed to be in Cubs gear on our show or their show with us joining. Either or. I don't care at this point. They owe us. They still haven't paid up. So
what we got to do is, like, whenever I think it's end of July is like when the Cubs play the White Sox on the South Side, like, get them to like do like a combined show with us for that week. And, it'll be an anniversary show for us right around that time too.
And you know what what we should do? We should go to one of their Are they doing a tailgate for that series? I feel like they are.
The
They usually do, right?
Saturday game of that series, they are. Yep.
That's the game that they should wear Cubs gear because they have waited so long to pay up. I'm gonna say it right now.
Be all surrounded by like all our friends on White Sox Twitter having to wear blue pinstripes. That'd be amazing.
They owe us, and it's been a year now, so I feel like that's got to be their, their pay up at this point. And then lastly, the other L, I think I called it earlier in the show, goes to me for just being so hard on PCA on the game against the Cardinals.
So
all right,
I do have one L, and it is also you. Because, because one check of the calendar right now, the Cubs just finished their last game in June yesterday. And you said, I believe it was in spring training, Justin Turner would be cut from the Cubs by the end of June. And here we are, and Justin Turner is still a Chicago Cub as we're about to enter July. So, L to you on that.
Hey, man, I'm still not wrong. He should be DFA'd at this point.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong, but it hasn't happened yet.
I can't help it that he's got some criminal photos on Craig Counsell at this point, because that's the only reason he's on this team at this point. Right. So I can't help that. That's not my fault. I didn't come in knowing that. So
exactly.
All right, fair. That's fair. You're right. I did say that. So I'll own it. Yep. Anyone else you got?
That's it for me.
All right, cool. Well, we got upcoming schedule. Let's wrap up here. I gotta go make dinner myself. We've got 3 against the Guardians coming up here. The ex-Cleveland Indians. 3 against them, and then they got 3 against St. Louis again before they move on to Minneapolis. So how you feeling? You got a homestand against 2 Midwest teams, one that we just saw and one that's kind of hovering around that 500 mark and hopefully trying to make a run in the AL Central, which doesn't look super great, but
wow. Yeah, Tigers look to have that thing wrapped up already. They're up like
Cleveland
10
still
games, I want to say.
Yeah. Cleveland still has good pitching. That's what they do. So
that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, the one thing about their pitching in this series is that they're throwing 3 right-handed starters. So we are not seeing any bullshit lineups with Justin Turner in them. It's going to be Michael Busch every day. Hopefully we get some Dansby Swanson and lower in the lineup as well too. One other key too, Matthew Boyd and Shōta Imanaga start the first 2 games. Cleveland has been one of the worst hitting teams against left-handed pitching this season.
Okay.
And then you got Cade Horton going on the last game.
Yep.
Hopefully you get a bounce back from him. I would really like to see Reese McGuire catching him because Reese McGuire caught him a lot in Iowa, but has only caught him 2 starts in Chicago so far. I'm going to say that they are going to sweep the Cleveland Guardians.
Wow. Okay.
They're getting the Guardians at the right time after I think they just got swept by the Cardinals in St. Louis. Speaking of the Cardinals, we move on to that series. That one. So let me see here. It's going to be
You're not going to see Boyd or Shōta.
No, you'll see Boyd. No, Boyd you'll see for the last game. It'll be a full turn.
That's right. You'll see Boyd. Yeah, you'll see Boyd for the last one. So you'll have to see Colin Ray.
Right.
And Boyd somewhere in there.
Right.
And who else would they face?
It would probably be so it's going to be
Taillon.
Taillon, yeah.
So it'll be so you'll see Taillon, Boyd, and Horton, or I'm sorry. I'm trying to blank right now.
Boyd, Colin Ray.
And Colin Ray. Sorry, yeah. I just said that. Yeah.
That would make no sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's to me sounds like at least 1 win for each side. Let me take a look at Colin Ray's home road splits. If he has been better at home, I'm gonna say that's a win in the game that he starts. Let me take 1 second here. So Colin Ray splits
at home. He is he's got an ERA of 4.53. Well, he's got a 4.13 on the road. He's given up 10 home runs at home, 4 on the road, and his and his walks are 12 at home, 7 on the road. And he would pitch.
All right. Well,
what day would he pitch? Well, hold on. What day would he pitch as well? Would that be the Friday, the first game?
He would go.
Or would that be tie-on?
Right. No,
yeah,
he
Friday.
would go Friday. That's right. Okay.
So that would be a Friday's a day game. Let's look at day splits here. Yeah. Ooh. I mean, just May and June have just been brutal. So it's not really like. Yeah, it's not giving much, man. He's been pretty bad. I don't know. He's been pretty bad over his last.
All right. You know what? I'm going to spin this. I'm going to spin this another way, though.
Okay.
The Cubs in that series against St. Louis got the majority of their runs against their bullpen, and I think that's a trend that's going to continue. Maybe a not great start from Colin Ray. They're going to take 2 out of 3 against the Cardinals.
Okay.
So
I think they. I think they go 2 out of 3 against Cleveland and 2 out of 3 against St. Louis. So I'm going to say they're going to go 4-2 over that stretch, but mainly just because I think they've just been playing so poorly and they just need to get to the All-Star break.
Okay, that's fair. I do wonder with the off day today, maybe they're a little bit more rejuvenated going into that series when whichever pitchers will have that extra day of rest. It would be Ray and Tyone.
Yeah.
So.
And then they have a day off on the Monday after too, so they can hopefully throw everything they got in that last series. So
perfect. There you go.
All right. Well, appreciate the conversation as always. Let's see what the Cubs do. We got Mike down at 5-1 over this 6-game homestand. I got them at 4-2. Cubs will play tomorrow. I believe it's a night game. And then also, I think one of the other things to mention real quick is looking at the series that they play. They're playing on TBS tomorrow. So they'll still be on Marquee, but they're going to be on TBS. So they'll be on primetime TV tomorrow.
Well,
on
Sunday.
On Wednesday, they play the Wednesday night of the game on ESPN.
Really?
They do. And then Thursday, they're going to be on MLB Network game of the day. That's the free game of the day.
Wow.
Friday, July 4th, they're going to be on Apple TV Plus. So another primetime game there. Saturday, they play on Marquee, which is no primetime. And then Sunday, as you said, Sunday night baseball game of the week against the Cardinals. So they've got, out of the 6 games, 5 of them are going to be primetime TV. So let's see. Let's hopefully they show up and show out for some primetime.
Yeah, there we go. The stage is only going to get bigger from here on out, so might as well get some experience in with that. Before we go, please, everyone, be safe this 4th of July. Come back with all 10 and 20, or if you already have less than that, don't lose any more, please.
We love you. We need you to type in the comments. So
exactly.
All right. Well, have a good 4th, man. I'm going to go celebrate my anniversary this week, blow up some fireworks with the kiddo, and, hopefully you get to enjoy some time off too.
Perfect.
All right. Let's go Cubs. Fly that W, baby.
Go Cubs.
Thanks for joining. Like, comment, subscribe. Bye, y'all.